Okay, a very good morning, everyone. On behalf of the Women's International Forum's Executive Board, a very warm welcome to our October event with a very special guest speaker, Madam Catarina Vaz Pinto, who just told me that she just stepped down as Deputy Mayor for Culture of Lisbon on Monday. Catarina is also the spouse of the United Nations Secretary General, His Excellency Mr. Antonio Guterres, and she's also the patron of WIF. So thank you so much, Catarina, for joining us from Lisbon, Portugal. We are really deeply honored to have you, especially in October, because we will celebrate the UN Day on Sunday, 24th of October. For those of you who are new to WIF, and there are several of you today, my name is Zarina Varukati. I'm from Singapore, and I'm the president of the Women's International Forum. Thank you for joining us this morning. Let me give a very brief introduction of WIF and the work we do. WIF is a speakers forum, and we have been in existence since 1975. Our objective is to provide a forum for briefings and discussions on issues of global importance related to the work of the United Nations. We are made up of women from all over the world, from the diplomatic corps, spouses of PRs and DPRs, and also professional women from New York. Very rarely we've had men, but men are welcome too. If you haven't become a member, please do join us. Send us an email at womeninternationalforum@gmail.com, or go to our website and you can download the membership form. And now I'd like to invite my colleague, Tina Kunjul from Mauritius, one of the vice presidents of WIF, to introduce our speaker. Tina, please.
Hi, good morning. Thank you, Zarina. It really is an honor and a privilege this morning to introduce you all to our speaker, Ms. Catarina Vaz Pinto. And congratulations, Ms. Vaz Pinto, for your stunning career these last few years, and stepping down on Monday. So that's something brand new. So we wish you so much success and just excitement for the next adventure to come. Enjoy these next few years with whatever is ahead. And we're just so happy to have you here today. As Zarina mentioned, Ms. Vaz Pinto has been the Deputy Mayor for Culture of Lisbon City since 2009. She also served as the State Secretary of Culture and was the Deputy Minister of Culture in the government of Portugal. She graduated in law from the Universidade Católica Portuguesa, or the Portuguese Catholic University in Lisbon, and has her postgraduate in European Studies from the College of Europe in Bruges, Belgium. Before taking up her last position, Ms. Vaz Pinto was the cultural manager and independent consultant in the areas of policies and cultural development and cultural and artistic training. She has served as the executive manager of the Gulbenkian Creativity and Artistic Creation Program, the Calouste Gulbenkian Foundation, and as the consultant for the Quatrainaire Portugal in the area of projects and cultural policies. She was the executive director and lecturer in the post-graduation degree program in cultural management for cities at the Institute for the Development of Business Management. And she also was and is the co-founder and executive manager of the Cultural Dance Association, Forum Danca. The list is as long as my arm, as you can see. So she's a very, very accomplished speaker today. Ms. Vaz Pinto was born in Goa, India. She is married to His Excellency Antonio Guterres, former Prime Minister of Portugal, who currently serves as the Secretary General of the United Nations. On her wiki page, which I looked up very briefly in case I missed something, it very prominently says that Ms. Vaz Pinto is currently the patron of the Women's International Forum. And yes, we are very proud of that. Thank you for that. We had the privilege of having Ms. Vaz Pinto in our WIF office shortly after the Secretary General took up his position, which was a few years ago. And she was so candid in the way she spoke about her profession and her general feelings about being a working mom and wife and politician. She talked about her role as a wife and mother vis-a-vis politician and career woman. She genuinely expressed her dilemma and thoughtfulness in making these two roles compatible with each other. And I remember her saying that for a woman, this did not come guilt-free. That line has stuck with me because I think we all have felt that way. She spoke of having a nursery in her office and being very proud of it. And I think what I remember most about her visit was that when she smiles, she genuinely smiles with her entire being. So Ms. Vaz Pinto, a very warm welcome to WIF, and thank you for being here today.
Thank you so much, Tina, for that very excellent introduction. Just to remind everyone of the format of today's forum, this is a moderator-led fireside chat. I'll begin with some questions for our speaker. And in the second half, I will open it up to all of you. If you would like to ask a question, please indicate it in the chat function in your on your Zoom screen. And we will call you in the order that your name appears. So our topic today is culture as an instrument of peace. It's a very important and vast topic. So I thought I would like to frame our discussion a little today. As a powerful force that bridges across differences, culture brings people together and thus underpins social cohesion, peace, and security. And policymakers can make a transformational change to the places they live in, as well as to the lives of the people who live there. And as mentioned by Tina earlier, Ms. Vaz Pinto has had vast experience over many years as a leader in this field. She has overseen the rebirth of Lisbon as a dynamic and culturally vibrant city. So let us begin with a question specifically on the work you've done, Catarina. You once were quoted, this was in October 2016, as saying that, I quote, "I think I will promote through my work in the local cultural field the same values my husband is promoting at the global level: diversity, respect, and mutual understanding." Can you elaborate a little on this? I believe you were specifically referencing your work as Councillor for Culture in the city of Lisbon.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you very much for this kind invitation. And I thank very much, Tina, for your very generous presentation and introduction. It's a pleasure to be here with you today. So, answering the question, well, it's true, as you know, most of the people now, 7% of people live in cities, and cities is where everyday life happens and is where life where change happens is in cities. So from the work in cities and the political work in cities, it's really it's also very transformative, and you transform life of everyone through different scales of action. So at the global and multilateral levels, and then the way the city is the place where concrete action takes place. And so what I have done and what we have done in the city in the last years, it's of course to try to, as in cities all over the world, to implement the SDG goals, and with that to create more sustainable development. And through sustainability and through a balance, we'll try to reach peaceful places and cities and communities. Concerning the SDGs, there is not a specific cultural goal, and people from the cultural field, we are strongly advocating in all the networks for this to happen in the near future, on whenever the SDG goals are developed, to have a specifically cultural goal. But also I always wanted to have to integrate my action and the action of the cultural policies of the city in global and other global frameworks, international. And the main network we have been taking part is UCLG, United Cities and Local Governance. I don't know you have heard about. And it's a global network of more than 300 cities all over the world, and they create a very interesting, very important strategic document, which is called the Agenda 21 for Culture. And precisely this agenda, this agenda was created in 2004, and this agenda argues that culture should be seen as the fourth pillar of sustainable development, and in our cultural policies we should have a multi-dimensional approach to culture, not as only one related with the arts, but also how culture can lead to a more inclusive and cohesive development. And so this is what we have tried to implementing in our city in Lisbon. I can elaborate a little bit on that. I don't know if you want to. Yeah. What were the tools that we use? Mainly the most important tools, I would say, it's to widespread our library network, because libraries are nowadays kind of are seen not only the places where you have access to culture through books and to written culture, but through other tools, to the access to internet. And libraries are seen as small civic cultural centers. So in the city we have 17 libraries from different scales, and in these libraries, which are the first step for access to culture, but it's also broad access to culture. We want to educate people for citizenship, for having an active citizenship, which in our country is we have been living under a dictatorship for 48 years until 74. And so this is still something that we can see in our global, in our educational and social educational system and requirements. Still we have people that don't, very little, but still some people that don't read, people have still a large part of the people have only the secondary education, and so civic participation, it's very low. And we think that for being and to have fulfilled citizens for the 21st century, you need to have a lot of participative skills, and that's what we have been doing in our libraries. Not only to have programs that open for diversity, for inclusion, that make intergenerational links between younger and elderly, that educate since babies and who are very little to make people aware for reading and for culture, and also through video games. So also we have some programs on video games that we think it's also an interesting educational tool in the present. So it's a very wide, widespread objectives that we can develop through what we think that is the role nowadays for a library.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. And thank you for giving specific examples of what you've done in Lisbon. You mentioned just now the Sustainable Development Goals. Amartya Sen has said that cultural matters are integral parts of the lives we lead. If development can be seen as an enhancement of our living standards, then efforts geared to development can hardly ignore the role of culture. I mean, in other words, culture is not just a preview of countries or people who have attained a certain level of development. It should be part of the development objectives. So what is your view on this?
Well, I fully agreed with Amartya Sen, who is really one of my most, I praise and I appreciate very much all his talkings and writings on cultural development. In 2004, he wrote a very important report. I think it was for UN, well, one of the main UN reports, and he was precisely saying how much development should be linked with cultural development, and that we all now in the 21st century are people of multiple identities, and this thing of multi-identities is a concept that he very much developed. And of course, because people sometimes, what has happened in the last decades is also the concept of culture has been enlarged, and so most people think when we are talking about culture, we in reality we speak about arts and heritage and promoting arts and heritage, and culture is much more than this. Culture are our beliefs, our values, our natural and constructed landscape. So it's a kind of anthropological sense of culture, and when Amartya Sen refers to this, it's about this, and because culture is our identity. It's the identity of each person, human being, and because of that, it's a multiple. Because maybe you were not the same because you were born in Singapore, but then all your life it was nurtured by all the experience that you lived in, and you changed a lot. But you are a mother, you are a professional, you are someone who lived, and you have your own religion. So all these levels contribute what in fact is your personality, and it's very important for personal individuals and for collectives, societies and communities to have a sense of belonging and a sense of identity. And you cannot, many times, and in post-colonial societies, when we think about development, many times what we had wanted to do is to export our economic models, our ways of living. And this is not what other countries and other continents are linked to, or what is their experience and what is their roots. And it's very important that in any way everyone is linked to their own roots. And of course you can grow up and evolve in a different way, but your roots remain your family, your religion origin. So societies can be more peaceful if you have a kind of respect for all of this. Of course, we are kind of, it's not true that culture is always a tool for peace, because we see that cultural many times is a way to create conflicts.
Yes.
But in my country, for instance, is not that much. It's not the country that has so much these disruptive, these conflictuous communities, and I think all over the world you can work in order to create a new culture in a positive tool for peace and for social cohesion and inclusion and for harmonious communities.
I agree absolutely what you said, and I really share your view about culture. As you mentioned, I'm from Singapore. We are multicultural. We have many identities. At the same time, we value each part of our cultural heritage and identity. And that, when you have respect for that, it can be a valuable tool for peace in the communities that we live in. Since you mentioned, being in different countries with different background and different living experiences, can I ask you a personal question about your youth? You were born in Goa. Which was part of the Portuguese administration when you were born, and did your youth growing up in different parts of the world, did it shape, and how did it shape who you became, and how did you bring that to your work in the cultural field in Portugal?
Well, I was born in Goa, but I don't live much time in Goa because when I had only a few months, I was born in Goa because my father was doing the military service. At that time, it was a mandatory, every man had to be, and my father was a medical doctor, so he was not there on the war, but doing serving as a doctor. But he left a few months before the liberation of Goa, which was in 1961. So I really didn't live much time in Goa, although I went there 3 more times during my life. And I really went, the first time I went there, when I came out of the plane and I had this sense of the ambience, I said, no, I feel at home, but I don't know. It was a sensation. I cannot explain you very well how it was, but I don't know. My parents always taught me a lot about Goa, and I had many books about and many jewels. I have many Indian jewels, but otherwise, I always liked a lot to travel, and I started to travel very young. At 17, and every year I was going on a trip, which was at that time not very common to my generation in Portugal. So I always had this appeal to travel and to know other people. I always had many foreign friends. And so I don't know, this is something personal, but I don't know if it's a kind of, it was because I was born in India or not, but I always had this appeal to live in a broader, not to live only in Portugal and not be only confined in my national,
I completely understand. I completely understand. I'm also like that. I feel at home in certain countries where I wasn't born, but I've spent considerable amount of my time. And I believe our audience today, a lot of them are also the same. Having traveled to many places, they will be able to identify with that. I like to give them an opportunity to ask questions. So I will soon open the floor for questions. So please indicate your name in the chat function and I'll call you. But before we go there, one last question from me is on women in leadership, because we are the Women's International Forum. So I just wanted to talk about the gender aspect. And I have talked about this with leaders of the cities from all over the world. I remember we had this conversation in Australia with the wife of the Prime Minister at the time, Malcolm Turnbull, who was also city councillor in Sydney. She ran the city. So we talked about differences between men and women leaders. Are there any marked difference between policies led by female and male leaders, specifically in how you run a city? She, for example, talked about how, she went to look at how the pavements are wide enough for mothers to, push their strollers to make the city more friendly to young families. So my question really is, in your experience, what have you seen?
Well, in Portugal, I would say the politics are still very, very male dominated. For instance, in this we had this last election on the 26th of September, and only 9 women were elected as deputy mayor, which is now, it's very little in 300 municipalities. Now there is a new law. All the councils has to be have to have parity. So I think many, and the lists in my city were, they had the same number of women and men, but the way the political system is organized and these practical questions, I think women, as you told of your friend, are much more concerned with practical questions. How city life is organized in order to facilitate women's life, women's and men's life, but mostly women, because women have to have many tasks, and so this. While I was deputy mayor, I always tried to have also through the libraries our libraries to have a lot of programs and discussion about women, gender equity and gender parity, in order to empower women, because it's also women need to be empowered and believed in themselves. But what concerns organization, I was very frustrated, I would say, for instance, with the schedule, the time you have in meetings, because you can, for instance, you can notice in Portugal people are very indisciplined, so meetings seldom begin at the right time, and so they tend to be to have endless schedules. And for a woman, I would like to start at 9 and to finish at 1, but I could never start. Well, my meetings would be like that, but when I was not organizing the meetings, it was much difficult. And the other women at the city council, they would act like me, and it's very difficult. It's not only when you talk about gender parity and to have more women in political power as roles, it's not only to have the quantity but the quality of the parity. So you have to work also on the mechanisms, on the way how city life is organized, and women tend to be much more concerned with care, and our societies in the 21st century are very much have to be care societies. We see it now with the pandemic, with much more elderly people all over the world. Societies are getting older and older. The question of kids, but this care approach should be developed not only by women but by men too. It's also, for instance, taking care of children. Now Portuguese legislation is very advanced in this, so men have also can stay at home or they can share with them the mothers and can have this parental time, but still not. More and more men are using it, but it's still not that much. So it's a kind of shift in our mentalities that has to be done in order for the system to be organized in different models, that in the models themselves are more equal and more easy for both genders to work and to live in.
Thank you so much for that. We have several people who would like to ask a question. We have Tracy, followed by Nazreen, and I do see the PR of Costa Rica who's put up his hand, so he will go third after the first two who asked questions. So I'd like to invite Tracy to take the floor first.
Thank you so much. What a fascinating look inside of your own life experiences, and I really appreciate your comments about cities as executors, really, of these grand global policies. That was wonderful. And also what you mentioned about libraries. Here in New York, there's a fascinating exhibit on treasures, which they have now become really, it's a fascinating exhibit looking at some of their artifacts, which is using that bridge that I think you mentioned for libraries. But for other cultures which are not so strong in a public library system as the States. For example, my husband is from Ecuador, and I've spent a lot of time trying to see exactly how this cultural exchange occurs. One of the bigger questions I have looking at this from the American and also Ecuadorian perspective is that there's been a push sometimes in the United States on trying to force a cultural cohesion. And I'm always curious whether that has to do with being such a young country or having people from so many different backgrounds. But one of the things that occurred when I was in high school was that E.D. Hirsch pushed an idea of cultural literacy. All Americans should read certain bedtime stories or have certain knowledge that we had a shared understanding, because we don't even have a mandatory common language in the United States. English is the de facto language, but every state has its own, makes its own decisions. So because we didn't even share language, as you pointed out, as this bridge to culture, is the literacy, right? There was this movement to force a curriculum into schools that would make us be similar in some way, which I thought was, pretty fascinating in hindsight. I just would like to ask, what other perspectives do you have on enhancing social cohesion that might not be in this forced way of we all have to share a certain curriculum? Or is there some way that this, you would hope it would occur naturally, but obviously that's not always the case. And how have you seen social cohesion enhanced through sharing cultural norms?
I think social cohesion, it's also linked to economic cohesion and mainly has to do with that. And in our country is mainly has to do with that. So in Portugal, as I told you, it's one of the oldest country in Europe. We have the same borders for 800 centuries. So 90% of the people have Catholic religion, although they are not so much practitioners nowadays, but still it's so. This kind of multicultural, diversity doesn't exist that much in Portugal. So in my country, and we have a lot of people coming from our former colonies many of them, they are already Portuguese. And now it's very easy. We have a very open nationality law, so it's very easy to acquire the Portuguese nationality. But even for these people, most of them, they are Catholic. So, but still, when we think about social cohesion in my country, we are much more worried with this kind of to give the same opportunities to people coming from deprived neighborhoods, from former colonies, the Roma people. When we talk about that, and women also, it's we of course it's also related to a kind of religious thing or ethnicity, but the main focus is to bring people to remove these economical barriers to a more better life, to education, to digital literacy, things like that. For instance, what we did in the library network is precisely to create new libraries in our most poorer neighborhoods, that of course are also the neighborhoods where most Black people live, people coming from immigrants live, all these different communities live. So things are related, but what is our main purpose is this kind of economic inclusion and social inclusion, in the sense of having rights to have to access to the same economic and social development and educational development.
Thank you for that response, and thank you, Tracy, for the question. We have Nazreen who raised her hand.
What another fascinating speaker for the WIF. I visited Lisbon 1982, and then 2019, in between probably 2013. So I have seen the different Lisbon and, the diversity you mentioned, I noticed. But through all these trips to Portugal, there has been one thing that stood up in my mind, and I heard it from many other people. And as you mentioned, care is very important, because that's how my memory is from Portugal, that people cared. Even immigrants there, they became, like, everyone over there is in ease. And, I don't know how to say it, but usually through the culture that we start generalizing people and nations. So what in your education system, is there anything that you try to teach the youth that they become kind? Or because I see different, like the younger people, sometimes they are kind of lost in the world. They are very educated. They are very they are high achievers in some countries, most of the countries, but they kind of lose that sense of care. So please elaborate on that. Thank you.
So I don't know. I think we have a very hospitable. We have a very strong sense of hospitality. The whole country, in all the cities, not only in Lisbon, all over. I don't know. It's something that is quite a characteristic of us as a people, and that attracts a lot of people here nowadays. I think it's because in a way, we are a very small country. We had to our history was a history of have a single frontier only with Spain. In the past, it was our first enemy, and we need to stay very close together to fight the enemy. But then we had the wide ocean, and that made us a very open people, and always a crossroad of cultures. In fact, Lisbon and the city and Portugal is the most Western European country. So this gave us a kind of geopolitical strategy that made us during the Crusades, the Middle Age, then in the 14th and 15th century, when this period of expansion began, a very important place in the world. And now again, with a new geopolitical landscape and a global world, we again can be a kind of multicultural center, and we have a lot of relations with our former colonies. Still, for instance, in the cultural field and the music field. So Lisbon is the hub for we call it now the criolla, música criolla, which is the mixed from African, Brazilian music, and many artists live there and they create this music that now it's very famous all over the world. But also, for instance, I would say that something that creates a lot of perplexity in the others. For instance, we never had since the television appeared, because we were a small country, so we had not the double films on television. We always had originals with subtitles, and so and always since the fifth grade in school, in the public school, we started to learn first language, a first foreign language. In my generation was in the French. And then in the seventh grade, we started with the English. So we had two foreign language. And now it's different. Kids start now even in the primary school with English, and then they choose another second language. But this thing of not always having movies and things in the original language also gave a very big educated our ear, and so that's when a foreign comes here, everyone tries to speak the language of our visitor, which is very unusual. And all over. The other day, I went to the market to buy some fruits and the pumpkin, and I was astonished. The lady that usually I buy, she was talking French, a very good French with a client, and she was speaking so well, and I was really proud of her because but it's this kind of openness that we created for being this country close to the sea, with also we had to, it was a poor country, we had to immigrate most of the time for other countries, for the US, Canada, Latin America, depending the periods of history. So for France, Central Europe in the 60s, we immigrated a lot. So we were always changing and exchanging with other countries and people. So I think it's a personal characteristic and due to our history.
Thank you. We have the PR of Costa Rica who wanted to ask a question, Rodrigo Alberto Caruso. And after that will be Pascal from Belgium. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and welcome and appreciation to Madame Vaz Pinto for her presentation today. I had the pleasure of sharing with you back in 2019 here in New York, and remember that. But in this occasion, we are preparing what we think is an important intervention in a couple of weeks, linked to the subject that is being spoken today, and therefore I invited our colleague and intern here at the mission, Angelica, to share the space with me, and of course is she the one that has the questions, or we share the questions together.
Please go ahead.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Ambassador. For me, it's such an honor to be here. As an intern, I've been learning in the past weeks and months how this mission is caring, especially about women. And as has been said before, we should think more about the role of men that have in the women's life and how they can enrich all our efforts to become leaders of the future and of tomorrow. My question is, I think, a little bit different from the question that was asked before, because I have to admit that I'm 26 years old and I don't feel that I am lost, and I don't feel that my generation is lost. Sometimes we have different inputs, but we are just trying to find a way to use our knowledge to do better and to be better. So my question is, how can we communicate to the young women, and how can we share with them to being strong and being able to succeed without thinking of all the difficulties that as a woman we can face, especially in the leadership and especially in the workplace? So what's the message that we can deliver to the young people and young women as me that are trying to emerge in this type of job? Thank you.
I think this is for that to happen, for women to be more empowered. You need education, a lot of education, because sometimes I say, I even said it to my husband once. I think sexism and is like racism. Everybody is and it's not aware that it is. So it's very linked to our education system for decades, and now things are changing, and women and men, it's because it's not a question of women. You only have equal societies if men they are really aware of the way that they need to change. Also, they have to change their attitudes and their values. So you need a lot of education for both sides, and to stimulate awareness to understand where you can have a more sexist attitude or not. So I think this is very important, to educate and to make aware people that and to dare to put in question some established attitudes and values. So, for instance, when Zarina was talking when I had a baby, at that time I was state secretary for culture, and I brought my baby to the office. So he was there. I started to work 1 month later. I didn't have these parental days, which in a way I should have had, but I brought my son to the office, and he stayed there with me for 6 months. And then after these 6 months, I asked in the place where we were working, it was the palace, the Palácio da Ajuda. 3 more women had children at the same time, and I asked.
Oh, I think you're muted accidentally. Catarina, I think, okay. We lost the last part.
So when I was there, we were 4 women that had the children at the same time, and I asked them if they wanted to have a kind of nursery for all the 4 children, and that we could hire a babysitter. But then they didn't want it. So I wanted that my own experience of not only to share this experience with other women, but of course now many women you see in some parliaments that women bring the children with them. So these kind of examples are very important to act as role models, because you need, and that is possible to have another way of living, another way to take care of children. But of course, you still need to work a lot on the global framework, on the schedules, the work schedules, how many days a week you work, if you can have flexible work at home and at the office. So this kind of things with the new ways of working with the pandemic, I think they will develop. But still, there is still this mentality that it's only for profit, and women have people have to work a lot of hours. And this kind of what you want from your work life, it's still, you have to change this approach, which is a global approach, and to have also better societies and more balanced society. You have to have different working tools and working system, and this is not only for women but for men too. Maybe we work a lot, or maybe some people work too much and others have no work, and you need to rebalance. And this is, I think, is one of the things that is at stake now. It is what will come out of after the pandemic. We don't know yet. The world is in a turmoil, and I don't know what will happen, but for sure because more and more women have access to education, so they want to have more fulfilled jobs. They want to have jobs that fulfill them. So kind of also social security schemes and things like that. So you need to work a lot on this.
Thank you for that. I have several other people also who put up their hands, but let's go to Pascal and then Kim Dorman, and then we'll see how we are doing for time. Pascal?
Yes, I'm here. Yes, I have so many questions. Thank you very much for your presentation. Quick reaction on men and women. We're still not there yet, so we count very much on the young generation. So thank you for continuing the fight, because my generation, we had to make choices all the time, choices that men didn't have to do. Child is sick, the school is calling, who's going to fetch the child? In my generation, I think it was close to 0% that men were doing that, going to parent-teachers conference during the day, things like that. So I think we still have to fight. It's still not there. The last competitive exam to become a diplomat in Belgium, more than half of the candidates were women. More than half of the candidates succeeded. But then at the end, only 30% were women, because they had to drop out because it was too complicated. They realized that it would be difficult and they would have to make choices. So, which is still a little bit worrying that they see it as difficult to combine both a personal life and a professional life still. I had a question about, because everything seems to come back to education. In fact, a lot of things you've said, and education seems to be the key. And in a lot of systems, culture is not really integrated into the curriculum. It's a sort of side thing. So you have arts, let's say arts appreciation, but in a lot of systems, it's a very, very small portion of the curriculum. And there's nothing about teaching not only cultural diversity, but also intercultural skills that would be very needed in the 21st century. And it seems that it's not really integrated in curriculum, which creates, in a way, a sort of gap between kids who have access. I mean, we all have kids who have traveled or called TCK, third culture kids, and have access to different cultures, different languages, and the kids who don't have that access, and that creates a sort of new gap that maybe didn't exist as much before between those who have access and those who don't. Those who have access to culture, but also those who also have access to having these intercultural skills. So how do we bridge the gap? How do we give access for everyone? And how do we change the curriculum so that we can include an appreciation of the different cultures, a respect for the different cultures, and the skills to measure the cultural distance and to appreciate the cultural difference?
That's a lot of questions. Thank you.
Myself. Sorry for that.
Well, this question of cultural education is a major question. And fortunately now it's a national question. So national governments are the responsible for educational systems. In Portugal, 2 years ago, there was the ministry defined a new profile for the student of the 21st century, and they included culture as a main, cultural education as a main tool, a main curriculum area, exactly because culture gives you the critical sense, the educational, the imagination, helps you to develop imagination, a critical sense of life. So it's very important to have a more flexible, to the openness to the other, precisely that. So in Portugal, although there is this profile, the curriculum are not that yet changed. But already when I was in the government, I worked a lot on the linking between education and culture. And now in the city, we developed a program for the schools, for the municipal. So the city now in Lisbon has the competence to run the primary schools and until the 6th grade. And we developed a program in order to introduce culture so all our culture, all venues, museums, libraries, theaters, public space, cinema. So they all had programs that were related to the curriculum. So we would bring the students to the institution, or we would hire an artist to work with them on this in the schools on the themes of the curriculum, precisely to create this more integrated. Because for me, culture is education, and education is culture. And of course you should have this overall approach. And also, I think nowadays this question is more and more. There are many philosophers and educators that argue, because we lost in the past decades the role of humanities in the curriculum, and this is a very crucial thing, because humanities, this thing of reading books, histories, memories, this is what makes you aware of your culture and your identity. And if you don't know about that, something is missing in your personal development. So, and more this question, how the society will, our dual society will be created in the future, both physical and both digital, and you are more and more connected to the digital, but you lose the sense of the physical and the physical presence and the physical encounter, and you need culture to rebuild these links and to give you a more human development. I think this is one of the major questions already in the present. And the role of culture will be a lot of, this is something that you don't stay, but I was just reading, tomorrow I have another meeting, and people are talking about this question nowadays.
Thank you so much, Catarina. Really, we appreciate your response to that question and many questions. I just wanted to check with you. Are you okay with time? We have...
Yeah.
So we can go
15 minutes. Yeah. Okay.
Okay. So let's go to Kim Dorman quickly, and Yoshiko Shiat.
Thanks so much, and thank you for this wonderful talk. As someone who works in libraries, I know how much they work to build community and civic engagement, and I'm just sort of curious how you came to that understanding, and if you feel that it's sort of specific to Lisbon and Portugal, or if it's building in Europe, and how other municipalities and can build on that partnership.
Yeah. So as I told you, so I've been in the government from 1997 to 2000, and in that period we developed cultural policy in Portugal is very unstable, but the most stable project is the library network. And in 1988, it was created, the municipal network of libraries run by the state, the government. And it was then it stopped for some years. And when we came to government again, we gave another push to these municipal networks. So I worked a lot on libraries, on books, and the importance of books, and on all this area. And so when I left government and our team, the network lost some gas. And so when I came to the city, I wanted, it was my priority project was to develop the library network, because I really believe that libraries are one of the most democratic places for everyone, not only to access culture and education and whatever. It's a decentralized system. So we have 7 bigger libraries, but then we have small libraries all over the territory, and we have for this kind of common loan of books. So you can go to one library and ask for a book that is in the other library or is in the catalog. So it's a commons. It's a network run centrally by a team, and so it's a very widespread. And so it's the one that goes to that. It's more close to the people, and that's why it's so important as a tool for the cultural development, for cultural enhancement, and for to develop democracy in a sense. So for me, it was the first thing so I created a team, a work team to redesign this network. And so after that, this team that was composed by people who worked with me before in the library, the government library networks. So they redesigned the network, and they create a new mission for the networks and for the libraries. And then we implemented since then, and this program was approved in 2011. And since then we have been executing the program, creating new libraries, renewing the libraries that exist, giving them a new mission, so they were more linked to the time we live in. And so for me, it's still the most important tool for cultural democracy, I would say.
Thank you. Is Valerie Kennedy next? I'm not sure.
Thank you so much for the wonderful talk. I came to New York I was a teacher from England, came here in the 70s, and preschools were very much, you would have Jewish preschools, you would have, they were all very much separated. And the concerned group of people created an international preschool, which is extremely diverse. And I had the privilege of working there up until about 10 years ago. And I have to say, that is a wonderful way of bringing culture together. People from all nations, all languages, where you bring young children together, because all parents want the same thing for their children. They want them to be happy. They want them to be well educated. And that, I feel, is a wonderful, I think that early childhood is such an important part in having parent involvement and appreciating cultural differences. And, it's a place where children share music and food, and the reality, these parents were pretty well educated. So they wanted to be together in a situation that was diverse, and felt it was important for their children to have that, beginning where people it's a natural part of growing up, that people look very different from one another. And I cannot say enough for, diversity in early childhood programs. And those programs, I think, have a huge impact for life when the children are together with this great diversity. I think it's a wonderful gift for children and families.
Yeah, that's true. For instance, here in Lisbon, the oldest school, primary school in Lisbon, it's in the historical center, and it's a place where many communities live, with Chinese, from Nepal, from India, Portuguese, and so this school has more than 60 nationalities, and it's a public school. It's very interesting. I went there the 1st of June here in Portugal. We celebrate the Child's Day, the 1st of June, and we went there to give books to the children. And there was a performance with children from 5 nationalities, and they all read texts in their own language, and it's really a very interesting school, and people live very well there. It's most of them are not very wealthy people, but it's really an interesting. And I of course I totally agree with you. In Portugal, what happens is that some private schools are more international, but they are more elitist schools. At the public schools, it depends on the area where they are located, but some of them are also quite multicultural in some areas. And this one, it's really something. And the teachers are so happy. Everyone is so happy in that school. It's really very grateful to go there and to see and to have this chance.
Yes. I think that's an important part too.
Yeah. I agree.
Diverse as well. I think it makes a very beautiful community.
Yeah, you have to. This is what the role of education. You have to give children since the very the early childhood the opportunity to have many different experiences. And so it's the most important things that if you can do it through the public system, it's very important, I would say.
Thank you so much for that. I got sort of locked out because of some connection problems. I'm back in. I'm not sure if Yoshiko had a chance to ask her a question.
Thank you very much, Darina. Welcome back. Yes, my question is from the grassroots perspective. Miss Catarina Georgieva of IMF states that resilient people who are educated and healthy have a good system of social protection when they have fallen to bad times like pandemics this time. And your library network program certainly helps build such social protection or social capital, especially for vulnerable children and underserved communities. Like in New York City, New York State, for example, something like 150,000 students have been missing. Mostly in a public school student, I can imagine that. So basically, they haven't set foot in school since classes have started. So my question to you is that is the pandemic has affected your library project, the network project? If so, what kind of new measures can you think of taking to improve the situation between, your organization, which, helps public school students to go back to school to get educated? Because education is the basic, economic, kind of base. So it's so important. That is my question. Thank you.
So during the pandemic, unfortunately, the libraries had to close as well as the school. So most of the kids had to online classes. But fortunately, here in Portugal, we have done so. I think Portugal is I know that Portugal is now one of the most vaccinated countries. So 85% of the population has been vaccinated. So what is missing, it's the 11% of children under 12, and then 3 or 4% of people that don't want to be vaccinated. So very few people don't want to be vaccinated. So now, since October, we are really getting back to normal life. The kids still have to wear masks in the class, but everything they were all vaccinated before the adolescents before classes started again. So we are in a quite good situation, and now and everybody wants to go back to school because they didn't want to stay at home. So everybody is happy to go to school. But during the pandemic, so only very few. Then when we open. They were closed for 3 months this year and 3 months last year. Then they reopened with very few people. Not many people went there, but we set a program that we were delivering books to people at home. So people could order the books online, and there was a kind of a car, 2 cars or 3 cars that would deliver, and this was a very successful project. So because people wouldn't go to shop and the bookshops were closed, and this was very interesting. Also, we have a kind another place which is a kind of museum and a library. It's from Fernando Pessoa, who is our most famous poet. It's very well known all over the world. And in Casa Fernando Pessoa, they had a very interesting project that was to read poems at the ear. So for people that wouldn't use internet, people would call to Casa Fernando Pessoa, and there was a team of people that were reading histories on the phone or poems or whatever, and this was a very successful project also. And more also than many workers of the city, they wanted to be part of this project, and there was a very good team already. Many people making these readings, and for more elderly people and for people who don't have access to internet, and this was very interesting.
Thank you so much for that. And Yoshiko's was the last question. So it just leaves me to thank Catarina for your time. We have run past our scheduled time. So thank you very much for sharing.
It was a pleasure. You're welcome.
Yeah, hope to see you when you are in New York. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. A quick announcement for those who are here. 9 of November, 10 a.m. is our next event. So please mark your diaries, and we'll send out the invitation soon. Thank you once again.
Thank you, Zarina. Thank you, everyone, and have a nice weekend.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. You too. Bye-bye.